give over to Jessie. And now I've started recording. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So like Kelly said, we want to give a big warm welcome for everyone. Thank you so much for joining our class today. The reason we are doing this Mod Podge class today is because we are still celebrating Mod Podge Month. National Mod Podge Day was May 14th, and over here at Plaid, of course, we celebrate all month long. So we've been doing a lot of great Mod Podge classes with Michaels, and they are available to watch now at your own leisure on Michaels Community Classroom, on their page on their website, or on their YouTube channel. But we're kind of continuing the month of Mod Podge Month with kind of a more retro Mod Podge craft by making some paper beads. So Jessie is going to teach us step by step how to make those today, give us some tips and tricks. And so we're so excited that you've all joined us today. And I think without further ado, Jessie, are we ready to go ahead and get started?
We're ready to go. Thanks, Em.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Like Emma said, my name is Jessie Jennings, and I'm a content creator here at Plaid. And we're going to be doing a really fun project today. Like Emma said, it's kind of retro. A lot of you, if you're familiar with Mod Podge, or just like making and crafting, you may have done this before. We're making some really fun paper bead necklaces. So Michaels has one of the best selections of papers. So all of their amazing printed scrapbook papers and beads. They have tons of both of those things. And they have, like I said, some of the best selections, some of the most beautiful pieces in the paper section and the bead section. So we're really excited to show you guys how to use those things for Michaels with our Mod Podge to make something really beautiful and fun at home. The best part of these necklaces is not only are they super easy to do, but they're completely unique to you. So depending on the papers and the beads you purchase, you can really customize these to match different outfits you have at home. This is also, you can make them kind of chic and modern and like more mature looking, or you can do this with kids too. We have a really awesome formula of Mod Podge at Michaels called Mod Podge Kids Washout, which just like the title, it's really safe for kids to use because it washes out of their clothes. So you can do some awesome like gluing and sealing crafts with it, but it's really, really easy for kids to use. So as we're going, you can imagine how you can kind of translate some of these tips and tricks into kid projects. So brighter colors, bigger beads, that kind of thing. You can have a lot of fun doing this. So to get started, I'm going to let you know what supplies I'll be using today to make my paper beads. Okay, so first of all, you're gonna need paper. So like I was saying, Michaels has an excellent selection of scrapbook papers. So I kind of prefer the thinner one, but whatever scrapbook papers you have on hand to make this project is totally gonna work. The thinner one's just easier to roll, but the cardstock ones work as well. So whatever you've got is fine. I've also got some of this stretch magic that we bought at Michael's. So this is just, I know it's probably hard to see because it's clear. This is just that like stretchy string. So the reason I like using the stretchy string is you don't have to worry about clasps. You don't have to buy clasps separately and kind of like figure out how to, you know, the length and like how to attach them and all that stuff. This is really easy because especially for bracelets, but for necklaces as well, you can just stretch it right over your head or right over your hand. You don't have to worry about the clasps. Also, it's clear, which I like. You won't see the string behind the beads. I also have some extra beads just to help embellish the ones we're going to make today. So like I said, Michaels has some stunning bead pieces, some jewelry pieces that you can make your own stuff at home. So we just have a few strings of beads that we purchased at Michaels. I've also got these really fun word beads. So it's just got lots of really fun, different little sayings and words. So you know, these are still super popular for bracelets. You can make your own little sayings or just, you know, give it as a gift, princess, if you have a daughter or a sister or something. Just really fun things you can do with that. I also have my Mod Podge, of course. So today I'll be using our Mod Podge Gloss, but really any of the original Mod Podge formulas work with this. You can use satin or matte. I have gloss today just because my beads that I'm going to be pairing my pieces with are glossy, so just so I have a nice consistent sheen across. But any formula will work. I also have some toothpicks today, and that's how we're going to be making our beads. So we're going to be wrapping the paper around the toothpicks so we have that nice hole through the middle that we can put our string through later on when they're dry. I've got some scissors, and then some extras that I've got today, just that I always kind of like to have when I'm crafting. I've got some wax paper, so just plain old kitchen wax paper. I have some laid down on my surface here just because we're going to be Mod Podging the strips of paper just to keep it a little bit less messy. I've also got a pencil and a ruler. So I would grab a pencil for sure if you're crafting at home. The ruler's not completely necessary because you can use your paper as a straight edge. But I have a ruler just for ease. So again, if you don't have the ruler, don't stress about that. You can just totally use one of the edges of your pieces of paper. And then I have water and a brush, of course, for applying my Mod Podge, and some paper towels. I know that was a lot, but I think that's it. So again, I'll be mentioning what I'm using as I'm going throughout the class. So if you kind of missed that, don't worry. I'll be just reminding you guys what you'll need as we go. Okay, Emma, any questions yet?
We do have one question. Susan was wondering if you have any tips for how to tie the stretchy cord without it coming undone. So maybe just when you get there, I'll try to remind you to demonstrate that for us.
Yeah, I totally can. I'd be happy to. Yeah, remind me when we get there, Emma, and I'd be happy when we start kind of assembling a necklace. I can show you guys how I do it anyway. I don't know if it's the best way, but it's the way that works for me.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, awesome. So like I said, I've got some wax paper laid out. If you've got like a silicone mat or a plastic table covering, or like some parchment paper or like freezer paper is good. Just, it's kind of clear, but just something to protect your work surface, because we're going to be like brushing Mod Podge out, and it'll just keep it from sticking to your table and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab a sheet of paper, and I think I'm going to do, I like this pretty like mint color here. So I got my paper here. So I'm going to lay it out. So what you want to start thinking about when you go to make your beads is the size of your beads. So you can see here, this one's like a little bit thicker. I'll show you guys up here. If you can see that bead, that one's a little bit thicker. And that's because I used a longer strip of paper, which we're about to get into. But then I have these really thin beads here. And that's because we use a shorter strip of paper. So you guys can kind of see the difference. This is a longer strip and a shorter strip. So you can kind of get an idea in your mind of like the style you're going for and the look you're going for as far as making your design. And keep that in mind as you're making your own strips of paper at home. So I've got my pretty paper here. I'm going to turn it over just because I'm going to mark it up with a pencil a little bit, and I don't want to mark the front of it just because I don't have to go back and erase it. It just saves a step. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my ruler, and we're going to start making triangles. So super duper long triangles. So you can be totally perfect about this, guys. You can measure the edges and make sure they're all like perfectly even, like little soldiers. But if you've crafted with me before, you know that I kind of like to eyeball things, and I just think that's okay. And I always like the way it turns out. So it's up to you. You can start marking it and being like kind of mathematical about it and get perfect beads, or you can just do like me and kind of eyeball it. And you can see here, they all look uniform once you string them together. Okay, so I'm going to start here. So I've got my ruler, I've got my paper flipped over. I'm going to start in the top left corner, and I'm going to lay my ruler so it matches up with that top left corner there. And then I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Let's go about an inch down, or maybe let's say half an inch actually. So I've got it matching my top left corner there. And on the right side, I've got it about a half an inch down from the top. And I'm going to mark that with my pencil, just that line there. And again, if you don't have a ruler, you can just grab one of your other sheets of paper and use it the same way, and just use that straight edge to help get that nice straight line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to match my line here where it ended on the right side with my ruler. I'm going to match it there, and I'm going to go about an inch below on this side. I just saw this is a 12-inch piece of paper. So most of the most scrapbook papers you'll buy at Michael's are going to be 12 by 12. Sometimes they're a little bit smaller. And if it's smaller, that's fine. Your bead will just be smaller. It'll totally work. But right now I have 12 inches across. Okay.
And Jess, just one more question while you're marking that. Wendy wanted to know, how do you keep the Mod Podge on your project from sticking to the wax paper over your workspace?
Great question. So I always try to remove it. If it's something that I'm worried about sticking, I'll remove it while it's wet, and I'll kind of shift it. And that way it doesn't have Mod Podge like sealing the edges, if that makes sense. I'll like put it in a new fresh area of the wax paper. But if it were to dry, you can just remove it. And if there's some dried Mod Podge on the edges, you can just trim it off with scissors. That's why I love working with wax paper. It's really easy to pull off.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too. The great thing about wax paper is that it doesn't stick to adhesives.
Yeah, exactly. So I love working with it. Silicone mats, that kind of stuff will work great too. Anything that's like doesn't let things stick to it, you know? Okay. So I'm going to match up on my right side here. So where we put that mark, I'm going to match my ruler up there, and I'm going to go about an inch down on my left side. And again, guys, I'm just kind of guesstimating. I'm going to try to eyeball it and make sure they're all at least similar. Once you start rolling it, you won't see any inconsistencies. So about an inch from the top on the left side, and I'm going to mark it there. And now I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna match it up on the left side now, and I'm gonna go about an inch from the side that we just marked, an inch down from that, and I'm gonna mark it there. And you can kind of see we're gonna keep on doing this. So that's kind of how I mentioned, you could totally take your ruler and like mark an inch, an inch, an inch to get them perfectly spaced. That's okay too. You can totally do that if like that's something you want to super perfect. But I'm just, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of guesstimate and make sure they kind of just look the same to me. So those look the same to me. So I'm just comfortable kind of continuing down my sheet of paper here the same way, kind of zigzagging and trying to keep it as evenly spaced as I can.
And we
So again,
didn't.
I'm matching.
Oops, sorry. I was just going to say while you're doing that, Jess, and we didn't include it in the supply list, but you totally don't need it to do this craft. But if you have a paper cutter at home that people use for scrapbooking, that would work really well for this too. It'd make it a lot quicker.
Yeah, like one of the sort of like guillotine cutters. That's a great idea. You can kind of just shift it, like, you know, like shift it and chop it. That's a great idea, Emma. If you're big into paper crafting, I'm sure you already have one at home. So that's a great idea. Okay, but again, don't forget, you don't need a ruler because I'm not even measuring it. I'm just using my ruler as a straight edge. So you can use the edge of another piece of paper. You can use whatever it is you have at home, you know, the edge of a binder or a book or something, a notebook. I do that all the time. But I'm just kind of guessing. And I'm just following the left and then the right. So I'm going to match up with the left and go about an inch down. And then I'm going to match up with the right and go about an inch down. I'm just continuing that. So I have this zigzag pattern. Okay. And you can do this for as many beads as you want. So however many zigzags you're going to get, and don't forget, we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, because they're kind of matching up like this. That's how many, you know, however many wedges of paper you have, however many triangles you have, is how many beads you're going to have. So if you only wanted a couple of this pattern paper or whatever pattern you're using, only do a couple and then move on to your next pattern. I'm just going to do this one pattern here just to help demonstrate it for you guys today. Okay, any questions before I move on? Nope. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just going to grab my scissors and as carefully as I can, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut on my pencil line. So if you wanted to use like a straight edge and a craft blade, like an X-Acto knife in your ruler, that's great too. You might get slightly more precise cuts, but again, I just kind of like to eyeball it. I like to just try to make it as even as I can. I'm not too worried if it's not super duper perfect. And I'm just cutting along my pencil lines.
And like we said, Michaels has a great variety of scrapbook paper to choose from that would look beautiful with this craft. But I've done this craft before with newspaper and magazines, and it's really cool just to see all the finished beads you can get from all the different textures on the paper.
I love that. I remember doing this when I was like much younger, like a kid, like in middle school. I remember making so many bracelets and necklaces for my friends using magazines. And they're just so fun to do. Like, it's just such a fun craft to make.
Mm-hmm.
And every single one is going to be totally unique, which I love.
And someone had a question earlier, Jess. They wanted to know if the embellishment beads were mandatory for this craft. Totally not. We just like the way they looked. And the best part is if you use different types of papers, like magazine paper. Oh, someone said wrapping paper. That's a fantastic
idea. Love that idea.
You can mix the patterns and the textures to create your own little embellishment beads and mess with the different sizes. Like Jessie was saying earlier, the longer the triangle, the bigger the bead. You just really get to play around with the different lengths and the widths of the triangles, and you get a bunch of different shapes, which is like so much fun about this craft.
Yeah, and we thought, you know, Michaels, like I said in the beginning, Michaels has such an amazing selection of beads and just jewelry making supplies in general. So we just thought how fun to like kind of incorporate those into a Mod Podge project. Kind of just shop around the whole store for one craft. We love that. We love it, including all the different kinds of you know, items that Michaels offers into our crafting.
Yes.
So again, I'm just cutting this right now. And I will show you, so these are going to be the longer ones. So remember when I held up in the beginning, I showed you the thicker beads. That was this length of paper, but I will trim some down just to show you if you had shorter paper, how they'll look more narrow. I will do a couple of those too, just to give you guys an idea for when you're planning out your designs in your head. If you're not crafting right now and you're planning to craft later, you can kind of get an idea of like what shapes and sizes you want and how to go about making those.
Mm-hmm. And just out of curiosity, I would love to know who is crafting along with us today and who is watching this, planning on crafting later.
Yeah, let us know, guys. What are you up to today? What you got going on? Okay, guys, so I've got all my strips cut out. So on the ends, of course, I've got a couple of extra strips that I'm not going to use for my beads. Oops, I'm making a mess. So these I'm just going to put aside. You can hang on to them for other crafting later, or you can dispose of them, totally up to you. But all of these now should be fairly even. So I got all my triangles here. This one got a little bent, but it's okay. I've got all my triangles here, which are almost exactly the same. Again, we eyeballed it, but as you can see here, you can't even tell. It looks like we measured it. So that's why I don't spend all that time marking it with a ruler if I don't have to. Move these out of the way. So I've got all these here. So again, mine are 12 inches long. So you can do it shorter or even longer if you want like really big chunky beads and you were using wrapping paper like somebody mentioned. I love that idea. You could do much larger beads if you wanted to. That would be really fun. You can get some like big chunky beads to go with something like this. You know, that'd be a really fun look. Okay, so I'm going to slide these over and I'm going to grab one at a time. I'm going to grab my Mod Podge. So again, I'm using Mod Podge Gloss. And the reason I'm using Mod Podge Gloss is because I have really shiny beads here today, and I just want to have a consistent sheen across my whole piece of jewelry. But if you had matte beads and you wanted to match, you could use matte or satin, or, you know, if you've got Mod Podge paper at home, like you can just use whatever you have on hand. The kids washout is great for a project like this. So, but again, I'm just going to be using Mod Podge Gloss. I'm going to open it up, and you'll see how it's going to start to get messy while we have this wax paper down. But I'm going to start brushing my Mod Podge right on. So I'm starting on the thick end, and I'm just putting a little bit. I'm going to start brushing my Mod Podge onto the thick end. Set my brush down. I'm going to grab a toothpick, and I'm going to start wrapping the Mod Podged end onto my toothpick. And I'm going to do a little bit at a time just for like mess sake, just to try to keep it as neat as I can. And don't forget, guys, it is okay to touch Mod Podge. Mod Podge is water-based and non-toxic. So do not worry about getting it on your hands. Once it cures, it is permanent. So if you get it on your clothes, I would try to wash it right away. But on your hands, you can totally just wipe it off, clean it off with warm soap and water when you're done crafting. It won't hurt you. So I'm going to continue adding Mod Podge as I go down. And don't do a lot of Mod Podge. I think when people are doing really any glues, they tend to overdo it a little. You don't need very much Mod Podge to get paper to stick. You just need a nice, even coat across the surface of your paper, and it'll start to get tacky right away. You don't need to glob it on because that's just going to get messier. And it's going to be honestly kind of harder to do it that way. So just have a nice, thin, smooth coat of Mod Podge, and I'm adding it again as I go. And I'm going to keep rolling it.
And Judy had a great question that I don't think either of us would know the answer to, but Judy said
Okay.
they wonder why the paper does not stick to the toothpick.
You know what? I think it's just such a small surface area. And especially if you pull, I'll show you guys when we get there, but if you pull the toothpick out while it's still a little bit damp, it just hasn't cured yet. And so it just kind of slides right out. If you were wanting to do larger beads with like a larger hole in the center, like for bigger string, if you were doing with kids and wanted to use yarn or something, you could use like a straw. And in that case, I might recommend wrapping the straw in like wax paper or something, just better safe than sorry, because you could easily pull the wax paper out. Just because it's a bigger surface area and it might want to stick on you, especially if it's like a paper straw or something, that will definitely stick. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to stick to the toothpick. I was kind of thinking that earlier. I was like, gosh, should we be wrapping these little toothpicks in wax paper? And Emma was like, every time I do it, I've never had it stick. So we were like, we're just going to go for it.
Yeah, and I think too, the paper wants to stick to the other paper so much due to the Mod Podge that it would rather stick to the paper than the toothpick, if that makes sense.
It's true. It's true. So Mod Podge was, especially this formula, was originally specifically formulated for decoupage. So it just wants to stick paper. It wants to stick paper to paper. Of course, you can absolutely stick paper to other things as well. But it would, kind of just wants to stick to the paper, like Emma said. That's a great point.
And real quick, Jess, we have some great questions and great ideas. So Anne wants to know, for the next time you roll a bead, would you mind just holding your hands a little bit closer to the camera?
Oh, yeah,
so you can see the rolling?
Sure
and then
thing.
Yeah, and then Paula said she has some bead rollers at home that work great, and Anne had a great suggestion to use wood skewers or dowels too.
Definitely. If you want a larger, I actually do use wood skewers a lot if I have like a thicker string, because the string I'm using today is super duper thin. It's almost like fishing line. So that's why we have toothpicks, because it's a very small, we only need a very small opening.
Yeah.
So look, guys, it's gonna slide right off. It's not even stuck on there. It just slides right off. So just want to make sure you don't crunch it or anything while it's still drying, because you want to keep that nice open round hole. But we're just going to set it down to dry. And we have that super cute little bead. It's like a diamond shaped bead. There's a name for these, like for clay. Somebody remind me what the shape of this bead is called. I can't remember.
And then while people are thinking of that answer, Jess, I have two great questions. So Michael says, question, my beads are often sticky after I coat them and are sticky for a while. Any suggestions on how to remedy this?
Great question. So Mod Podge can tend to be tacky for a little while. You really want to give it like 2 or 3 days to really start to like dry out and start curing. Because there's a difference. You want to read your label. There's a difference between drying and curing when it comes to Mod Podge. And you really run into a problem if you're using one of our Mod Podges that is water resistant. So, you know, dishwasher safe or outdoor, for example, you want to make sure those are cured. And what that means is that it has become permanent and solid. So there's a difference between dry and cured. So make sure to read your Mod Podge bottle when you get it. But for projects like this, you can totally use it before it's cured, but you will notice that tackiness will go away over time as it begins to cure. So just something to keep in mind. But we do have some formulas that are just right away non-tacky. So if you guys had Mod Podge Ultra at home, which you may be familiar, we've talked about a lot in the Michael's Mini classrooms. It's our spray sealer version of Mod Podge, and that is non-tacky right off the bat. So you could do this with your, I wouldn't recommend it for paper crafting, like for things like this, because it doesn't stay, like I said, it doesn't stay tacky, so it won't want to stick to itself right away. But for sealing, you could absolutely spray these with Mod Podge Ultra, and that will seal your beads, and it will be completely non-tacky as soon as it dries. So that's a good option if you're worried about that.
And then thanks for answering that, Jess. Martha had a good question too. She wants to know if she's thinking of using some ribbon. She's afraid it might be too soft. Do you think ribbon would be a good string alternative?
I do think it's a good idea. The thing is, you want to make sure you have this triangle shape. If you want to get this, I saw somebody said it's bicone, I think is the shape of it. To get this bicone, like rounded shape, if you just had all one length, it would just be kind of a cylinder, which could be cute too, depending on the look you're going for. So you probably could cut your ribbon into this shape. It may just start to fray. It may be like a little bit, you know, finicky when you're trying to cut it into a triangle. But if you got it to work, I think that'd be really beautiful.
Yeah. And then, so we had some people give you your answer, Jessie. Susan and Paula said bicone. Did I say that right?
Yes, I think that's right. I like to do a lot of clay crafting too. And so like those clay, like those bead rollers, like for polymer clay beads and things like that. I knew there was a name for it. I just couldn't remember it.
Yep. And then, so we have another great question asking what different types of shapes we can make with the beads. So if you were to use like a long rectangle instead of that long triangle, you would get a more rectangle shaped bead. If the width of the bottom of the triangle was a little bit thinner, then you would get a more circular bead. So this is kind of a beginner beads class. So you can do a lot with the basic triangle. You can do a lot with the basic rectangle. And once you have all these great tips about using the Mod Podge and sealing it and using your toothpick to get a really taut, close bead, there are a lot of great templates online on different shapes for how to cut out your paper to make different shaped beads. So that would be great to type it, pop into Google to get some of those templates.
Yes, that's a great idea, Emma. There's so many things you can do. I like doing this like bicone, like we've established shape, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate to you what your bead would look like if you just use a rectangular piece and didn't make that triangle. Like Emma said, it's going to be a straighter bead. It's going to be more of a cylinder, which is just a different look of bead. So I'm going to show you. So you can see here, guys, I did not make it into a triangle. It's just a plain, strip of paper. I try to get as even as I can. So I'm going to show you now what this will look like instead of doing the triangle shape. Just so you guys, I'm definitely a visual person. Like I'm better at like seeing something as opposed to hearing it. I can understand it much better. So hopefully I'll be able to show you guys some differences so you can kind of wrap your head around, how it will look when you're finished. So I'm going to start wrapping this. Again, I did the same thing. I just dipped it in some Mod Podge. I'll try to hold it up. I brushed on some Mod Podge onto the edge. And I'm going to start rolling it just on the part where I have Mod Podge.
And we've also found too that it's not the end of the world if you don't, but it is kind of important to try to keep that really straight line when you are rolling so that it doesn't become askew and you can manipulate the shape of your finished bead.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't hold it up last time, guys. I know I got that feedback. So I'll do another one after this one and I'll show you. I'll hold it up higher so you can kind of see how I'm being careful as I'm rolling it. But this one's easy because it's just straight.
Yeah,
and see how rolling it.
sorry, you see how Jesse's kind of like tugging and rearranging, like
Yeah.
giving that little tug? That's just to straighten her bead out. And she's just doing that so that when she's done rolling her bead, it is the shape that she wants. And the center is directly in the center, the highest point of the bead for those bicone ones. But for this cylinder one, and Susan let us know that these cylinder ones are called a barrel bead because they're straight, which is great to know. Thanks, Susan. So that it's as straight as possible.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of adjusting it. You know, I didn't really like measure this one perfectly, so it's probably not a perfectly straight piece of paper. So it's kind of wanting to go a little bit crooked on me. But you could see if you were to use like a paper cutter and like really measure it out so it's really exact and precise, it would be a more precise bead. So just again, just things to keep in mind. I'm kind of winging this one right now, but you can get an idea of what it would be like. You just probably for this one would really want to measure it out and maybe use your paper cutter at home if you have one, just to make sure it's nice and straight and like your two edges are perfectly parallel. But here we go, guys. You can see you get this really cute, like we said, a barrel bead. Now we know.
Adorable.
But it's more cylindrical as opposed to this one that has this, has like a higher, it's like a little bit rounder looking. So can you even see those?
Yeah. Can you guys see that?
This is a straight paper. And this was the triangle papers to get an idea of what the different looks are. You could do narrower ones if you wanted like tiny beads. You could even use them as like filler beads, like spacer beads. So you could do a bunch of these and then do a tiny, barrel beads like someone mentioned and have just different sizes and shapes on your necklace if you didn't want to get some of these extra pre-bought beads at Michael's.
And Jesse, we have a fellow polymer clay fan. Roberta says you can also make this type of beads using polymer clay.
Definitely. I love the idea of mixing paper beads with polymer clay beads. I love making polymer clay earrings at home. It's my like at home hobby. And I incorporate paint and all kinds of things into my earrings, but I love the idea of using Mod Podged paper beads with your polymer clay. That is such a great idea.
And another question, Jess, Judy says, what is the shelf life of Mod Podge? I have some from a couple years ago. I don't know if we know exactly off the top of our heads what the shelf life of Mod Podge is, but if you have
we use it too fast to find out here.
Yes, but if you have it from just a couple of years ago, then it's definitely still able to be used.
Yeah, I would open it up. You said Judy was, I would open it up and just see what it's like. If it looks like it may have dried out, it may not be great. But if it's still, you can see here, oh, I dropped a bead in there. How did I even do that? If it's still like, I don't even know how that happened. Okay, well, that one's nice and coated. You can see it's like nice and white and it's really liquidy. It moves around. It's nice and pure white. I know that this is nice, fresh Mod Podge. If it's a little bit crusty, you may want to, invest in another bottle, but it does last a pretty long time. The key is making sure that you remove all of this Mod Podge, over time that may dry onto your, the lid of your Mod Podge, because that keeps it from sealing completely tightly. Like you want to make sure you get, every time you use it, you get all this dried Mod Podge out of the what's this called? I can't think of words. The thread. You want to make sure you get all the dried Mod Podge out of the thread of the lid, so you can make sure you get this really nice, firm, sealed lid. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you have Mod Podge and you only use a little at a time and you're going to have it over a few year span, just make sure you always have it nice and sealed and it'll last you a very long time.
And since we're talking about sealing our Mod Podge and, closing it with the lid and everything, we've heard a lot of people like to use, sometimes people have a hard time opening their Mod Podge after it dries around the thread. I like to do it kind of like the cave woman way and whack it on the table to break up some of that dried Mod Podge. But a lot of people will apply a little bit of Vaseline around the thread of their Mod Podge, and that really helps it to open up a lot easier the next time. So we've heard a lot of people use that trick before.
Yeah, and like I said before, removing that dried Mod Podge from the thread of your lid is the key to keeping it from drying, from sealing shut. That's really the key. It keeps all the air out and it keeps your lid from wanting to glue itself to the Mod Podge. But also, if that does happen, because I know I'm definitely not a good rule follower when it comes to crafting. I always, forget things, and my Mod Podge has definitely glued itself shut. Don't get me wrong. I like to squeeze it just a little bit because the bottle, it's a soft plastic bottle, and you can kind of hear where like the seal is breaking. You can hear where it lets air in as you're doing that, and you know that the glue is coming apart. So then you can usually get it open and remove that glue and seal it back together. So.
Yeah, and everyone is loving the Mod Podge Ultra Gloss Spray step
Oh,
to
cool.
help them become less sticky and to give them that
Yes.
really beautiful glossy sheen.
Yes, that's why a Mod Podge Ultra was kind of a game changer. Not only because it's a spray, people have been asking for a Mod Podge spray for a long time, but it is also non-tacky, which is a big deal. And also no brush strokes because it's a spray. So a lot of things, everybody loves Mod Podge, but just, you know, every craft product has its own quirks and things that you just need to work around. So that was kind of like just a total game changer, the Mod Podge Ultra. And it's also water-based and non-toxic. So you can use it inside crafting just like you would use the regular Mod Podge formulas.
And I love this comment, Jess. Anita said, I love these beads. Someone gave me one of these necklaces once and told me it was made from paper. I did not believe it, but now I see how it was made.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great gift. What an awesome gift.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to keep making these beads, Em, so I can hold it up a little bit. I'm going to do another triangle one so I can hold it up and show everybody a little bit closer how I start to roll it. And I've kind of been letting it sit here. So hopefully, okay, it's not stuck. So I'm going to hold it here so you guys can see. I'm going to place my toothpick right here in the middle, and I'm going to try to get it even. And the hardest part is kind of starting it, making sure you got it nice and even, but you can see it's pretty tacky, so it kind of wants to stick. So it's stuck on there kind of like a flag now, and you can just start rolling it. And you kind of want to get it as tight as you can, just because that's going to be a more durable bead. If you have gaps in there, just over time, that's just going to be, you know, it's going to kind of affect the structural integrity of your bead. But if it's nice and solid, if it's nice and you know, paper to paper to paper, you're not going to have that. It's going to be really strong. It's going to be a nice strong bead. It won't get crushed later on, like in wear and tear and things like that. So I'm going to continue adding my Mod Podge.
And Jess, Tiffany says, there's quite a selection of paper at Michael's. They thought about finding something to fit summer. Their summer look like palm trees or a more Americana style paper.
I have some right here. Look how cute this is from Michael's. This is the Recollections brand from Michael's. And how adorable is that? All the monstera leaves and the big tropical leaves. That'd be really cute for summer.
So cute.
Yeah. So again, I'm just carefully kind of adjusting as I go. I'm just using one hand to make sure to kind of guide my paper, make sure it's staying in the middle so I get those nice like rounded edges. And then I'm using my other hand to kind of twist my toothpick, just wrapping it around itself. You guys see that better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And again, I'm just kind of applying a little bit of Mod Podge at a time. And the reason I'm doing that is because Mod Podge can dry pretty quick, especially if you know, depending on your climate and the way you keep your house, if you have some dry air, it'll dry pretty quick on you. So that's why I like to do is a little bit at a time. It's also less messy.
Yeah. And just someone asked a little bit ago, sorry, I just thought of this out of nowhere. Okay, Susan wanted to know, could you add water to the Mod Podge if it seems dry?
You could. It is water-based, so you don't really want to dilute Mod Podge just because it doesn't really need it. Like I know a lot of people try to get like similar consistencies as Mod Podge by using other glues and mixing water. And I gotta be honest with you, I may be biased, but it's just not the same as Mod Podge. I would do my best to keep my Mod Podge just pure. I wouldn't add any water unless you really needed to. If you were like in a pinch and you had some old Mod Podge that had kind of thickened, you could mix a little bit of water into it, but I would just be careful with that. So there we go. We have this nice, cute bead now. Super easy to do.
Love it.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah, and to add to that answer, Susan, I have used in some of my paper mache crafts when I make some homemade piñatas and stuff. Sometimes I'll add just a touch of water to my Mod Podge just to keep it flowing a little bit smoother.
Yeah. All right. So should I do a shorter one now too, Emma?
Yeah.
We have time? Yeah, we've got time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like if you do a shorter strip of paper. So you want it to be still pointy. You don't want to cut off this part if you want to have that nice bicone shape. So you want to cut off the chunkier part and try to get it as level as you can. So I'm just going to trim it off there. We're going to see, try to get it as level as I can. We're going to see what it looks like to have a shorter triangle of paper, what kind of bead that's going to be. So again, I'm going to start by applying my Mod Podge. And grab a toothpick. And again, keep in mind, whatever you're wrapping your Mod Podge or your Mod Podged paper around, kind of, you can base it off of the width of the string that you're using. So we have very thin string we're using here right now. So that's why I have these toothpicks. So they're super tiny and narrow, but if you're going to be using bigger string, you might want to be using a wider, like someone mentioned, a skewer or a straw or something of that nature.
And Jess, I think some people are thankful you're showing them how to do this with a shorter piece of paper, because a lot of people have smaller paper pads at home.
Oh yeah. Oh good. I'm glad it's helping. So it's really just the same thing, just shorter. So you're just going to get a thinner bead, which is okay. It's still cute. I'm trying to make sure I'm in the camera. I keep moving it. So again, I'm just using one hand to kind of steer my paper, make sure it's staying in the center, and the other hand to twist my toothpick as I go. And again, I'm just going to continue. I need to add a little more Mod Podge to this little tail at the end to make sure it's nice and sticky so it doesn't want to come up.
And Stephanie said you can double up the paper to make beads that are bigger. It can be tricky, but it works.
Oh, okay, cool. Great tip. So you can see here, guys, it's just a tinier bead. It's the same shape, just tinier. So we got this big chunky guy here. That was the 12 inches. And then this one, I don't know how many inches I cut off, maybe 4. So this is maybe 6 inches or so. So yeah, I guess, no, 8 inches or so, not.
Yeah.
6 plus 4 is not 12. Math, guys. So yeah, this is probably about 8 inches and this one was about 12 inches. So this gives you an idea of the different size beads you can achieve using different lengths of paper.
And like we said in the beginning, if you're looking for a less wide bead, then you need to have a less wide base of your triangle. If that makes sense.
Do you want me to show that, Emma?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to trim one of these down so I don't waste these pieces of paper. So I'm going to grab my ruler, because you do want to make sure it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know the correct names of triangles. You want to make sure neither side of your triangle is a right angle. You want to make sure that, it goes up, that it's like the tip is perpendicular to the base, if that makes sense. So like if I were to draw a line down the middle here, the middle would be a right angle. This is a right angle and not this side, if that makes any sense. So you don't want to like use the edges of your paper. Is that making sense, Em?
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to be lopsided. You want it to be nice and even down the middle, like this one here, nice and rounded. So anyway, and hopefully that makes sense to you guys, but I am going to go ahead and I'm going to trim this one. So I'm going to edge. Oh.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
That's okay.
I was just going to say, while you're doing that, Catherine had a great suggestion. You can poke the toothpick in some floral foam or styrofoam to allow it to dry.
Love that idea. We use styrofoam all the time here to like dry beads and things like that when we're painting. So I'm going to try to trim this evenly on both sides so I still have a nice triangle here. I do my best. Just trimming this one down so I can show you guys what a narrower triangle would look like, what that bead would turn out like, just to give you guys an idea when you start to design your jewelry and start to make your beads, what kind of shapes and sizes you can achieve before you have to go ahead and try to experiment for yourself.
And Jess, can I ask you a question?
Of course, please.
Okay, so someone had a question. Is there paper available that looks metallic so the beads look like metal or steampunk beads? Someone answered and said Michael's has Recollections metallic paper, various metallic colors, which they certainly do. So you can choose to either do that. And also here at Plaid, and it is available at Michael's, of course, we have a really awesome product called Folk Art Treasure Gold, which you might have heard us talk about before. It is the most metallic water-based paint on the market. We love it for everything. So that brings up a really great point. If you wanted to, add some flair to your beads, once they're fully dry, you could paint on top of them. So you could even add some character in that way.
That is an awesome idea. And I love the idea of painting beads. Why don't we think of that?
Yes.
I guess.
And then we had another great question a little bit earlier. Let me find it. Somebody said, after I make the rectangle bead, can I cut it to make small spacer beads? Will these beads get crushed or flatten with time?
You know what? If you were going to try to like slice this to make smaller ones, I would for sure let it dry completely so it's nice and hard. While it's still wet, it might be a little bit soft. And you might want to do some kind of like sawing blade. I don't know if I'd use scissors because it might crush it. I think your best bet is just to use smaller strips of paper and make them small to begin with. I just would be afraid it would get crushed because you just don't want to crush that hole in the middle because you won't be able to string it, which is, the whole point, of course. I'd be worried about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have this narrower one, guys, so I'm just going to continue doing this one. I'll have Emma continue reading your comments and questions, but just so you guys can have an idea of what a narrower strip of paper would look like when it's finished.
Great. Anne wanted to know, could you do a lopsided bead or triangle for the visual impact, or would the paper fray?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean for that one. Like a lopsided one would be like I was saying before, like if you did a triangle and one of the edges was a right angle, it would end up lopsided. I'm not sure what you mean by fraying though. If maybe they could clarify for us, I'd love to help. So again, I'm just using my left hand to kind of manipulate my paper and make sure it's going on nice and straight. And I'm using my right hand to turn my toothpick.
And I love this comment from Mary. Mary said, I'm going to try this out with assorted shapes of hard, smooth surface, plastic / acrylic beads that I have from inexpensive, worthless costume jewelry. Various papers could give them lots of creative potential.
I love that idea. We here at Plaid, the past couple of years especially, we love taking something old and making it new, whether it's furniture or old jewelry, or old vases that we find at estate sales or at the thrift store. So I love the idea of like salvaged beads from costume jewelry. I love that. I hope you guys do this with Mod Podge and you hashtag Plaid Crafts, because I really, really, really want to see all the stuff you guys are going to make with this.
Mm-hmm. And then Karen had a great question. Will you seal the outside of the bead when the Mod Podge, when this bead dries?
Yes, we will, Karen. That is a great question. So I kind of use it as a rule of thumb. I like to wait, whenever I'm using Mod Podge, if I'm decoupaging or making something like this, I like to let my Mod Podge dry completely before I seal it. And the reason you do that is because you could just adding moisture to it while it's still wet can cause bubbles. So that's really goes for like decoupaging. If you're making like a dresser or coasters or whatever it is, if you're going to decoupage paper down, let it dry completely before you go to seal it. And that's how you prevent bubbles. So I just kind of use that in all of my Mod Podge crafting. Whatever I'm doing, I let it dry completely, but then yes, I will go back with a coat of Mod Podge and seal it when I'm done.
Great.
Here you go, guys. You can kind of see the difference there.
Yeah. And Anne clarified her question. She said, lopsided, does the bead have to be even all over? Like, would the bead catch and possibly, I guess, rip the paper in the bead?
Oh, I understand what you're saying now. Okay. Well, that's why I was saying too, it's important to make sure that like when you get to that little tail, it's nice and even. So you're thinking like if one side was thicker and one side was thinner, I guess.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where it comes down to sealing it. So the Mod Podge will also strengthen the paper. So that's why it's a really good idea to either add, whatever Mod Podge you use to create it, add a nice, like liberal coat of that when you're done. And don't forget, it'll always dry clear. It'll look milky, but it'll dry clear. Or like we said, use the Mod Podge Ultra, because that also works really well as a stiffener. We use Mod Podge Ultra to stiffen paper and fabric and things like that. So that will really strengthen your bead if you decide to seal it with Mod Podge Ultra.
Yeah. And then Fran wanted to know, should we let the beads dry on the toothpicks or slide them off to dry? Usually they will just come right off the toothpick when they are still a little bit damp when you're just done rolling them.
I'm kind of twisting it, you can see. I'll show you.
Sometimes you got to wiggle it a little bit, but then it'll come off. And same if it is dry, sometimes you just got to wiggle it a little bit, but then it'll come off the toothpick.
Yeah, just be gentle. You might want to have some more patience than I do, but you can see just came right off. It's a little bit damp. If you really let it dry, there's always a risk that it may want to stick a little bit. But that's why just before it completely dries, it's nice to just kind of twist it off.
And Jess, I think everybody's ready for the moment of truth where you start stringing your beads.
Oh, okay, cool. They're like, we've seen enough.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to grab, like I said, I'm going to be using this, it's called Stretch Magic. So it's basically like, looks like fishing line. It's probably hard to see on camera, but it's basically a fishing line, but it's elastic. So the reason I like to use this is then I don't have to mess with like clasps and, attaching them and buying them. I can just use this and then it'll fit, my wrist, or I can get it over my head or whatever.
Yeah, and it's in the jewelry section at Michael's, and they have a variety of different ones. They have like metallic and white, black.
Yeah, we like clear just so we don't have to worry about the color. We can put any beads on this and it'll match. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna grab some of these beads as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna detach these. Snipping it off the packaging. All right, so I've got some that we pre-made that are nice and dry. So you can see here, these ones we made earlier and then we sealed them. So they're a little bit shinier. I don't know if you can see that. But these are nice and dry. So that's why we're gonna go ahead and use these for stringing. Maybe I'm gonna let the blue ones we did dry a little bit more, we'll see. So you can start by, knotting the end if you want to. I oftentimes don't because it's kind of hard to get a knot big enough anyway to keep my bead from sliding off just because the holes are a little bit wide. So I usually just try to be really careful and not let them slide off the other end. I kind of start with a generous piece of string, much more than I need. So I can just kind of, like I said, kind of be careful and just not let them slide off. So I'm gonna start stringing. I got this really pretty bead that we bought at Michael's. Oops. So I'm gonna start stringing it through there. And then maybe I'll use some more of these beads. I'm gonna cut this one too. Have a little bit of a variety. Start with him. I forgot my glasses. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to add this one on. And then just like any other bead, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna string our homemade beads on. And I always like to go in kind of a pattern, like be a little bit strategic with it. You can do it random or you can do it in a pattern, totally up to you. But I'm just gonna continue stringing it through here. These are like clay beads.
Yeah. And Anne had a great suggestion. You can attach a binder clip at one end to keep the beads from sliding off the string.
Oh my gosh, that is an awesome idea. Like one of those like alligator clips. I
Yes.
love that idea. Or a lot of times too, when it's kind of like making friendship bracelets, I'll do it on like a clipboard. So I can clip this to the end and then I know it's like I can kind of work off the clipboard and it's not going to slide off. All such great ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use one of these. Why not? And of course, you may want to be a little more strategic with your bead selections at home. I'm just kind of having fun to show you guys how I would string it, but you can make really pretty patterns. You can see the ones we have here. I'll show you these finished ones. This one's beautiful. There's like blues and greens, and we use some of those fun word beads on it. Isn't that so pretty?
Yes.
And this one's a little funkier with these big floral clay beads with these really pretty colors. And there's wood beads on there too. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can do this.
And Jess, does it have a, what's the word I'm looking for? Can you, on the packaging for the beads, can you see what those beads are called, or is it just?
Oh yeah.
People are curious what beads are using. Yeah,
so this one's a bead gallery. And let me see if it has a name for this particular one. It's called multi-ceramic round. So that's what these big ones are that look almost hand painted. I think they may be hand painted actually. They're beautiful. So these ones here, these florals are called, the brand is Bead Gallery, and they are multi-ceramic round. So that's those. And then these ones here, I believe, these are Bead Landing. Again, all bought from Michael's. These are Bead Landing, and they are called semi-precious Amazonite, and they're 10 millimeters. So semi-precious Amazonite, 10 millimeters.
We had to double check with our gemologist.
I know, I looked at Dylan. Dylan is really into gems and stones. So I was like, how do I say this? Nice to have him around. Okay, so there you go. So yeah, if you want to get these exact beads, again, we got them from Michael's. We just went to the store and bought them there. So many awesome selections they have as far as beads go at Michael's. They have like one of the best selections of any store, in my opinion. Definitely your go-to bead place.
Definitely.
You'll use some of these narrower ones. And this one looks like
the most, magazine. Yeah, I was gonna say that can be the most fun part, is just going in the bead aisle and like letting the bead aisle direct what kind of paper beads you're gonna make.
I love that idea, Emma. So like hit up the bead aisle first and see what kind of beads you want to use for your accessories for your paper ones, and then go over to the paper aisle and pick papers to match. That's a great idea. Okay, so I'm just gonna string a couple more, and then I'm gonna tie it off to show you guys how I like to tie it off. All right. So if there's gonna be a necklace, you might want to fill it up a little bit more. Or if you're doing a chain or something, this might just look pretty just hanging this way. Or it could be a bracelet. It'd be, kind of big for a bracelet actually. You can make it a little bit smaller, but totally up to you. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna tie this one off. And I just like to knot it. I like to knot it as many times as I can without it kind of looking strange, but I'll show you. So I'm just gonna do a regular knot, just like I'm tying a bow. And I'll do maybe like 2 or 3 knots. And again, this is just the way I do it. I'm definitely not like a pro jewelry maker. So it sounds like some of you people out there are really into, beading and creating, pieces of jewelry. So you may know a better way than me, but this is kind of the way I do it. I'll do as many ties as I can without it getting too bulky and funny looking. Again, I'm just doing regular knots here. And then sometimes if I feel like maybe I'm just extra worried about it coming undone, I'll add like a touch of super glue or like nail glue if you have that at home. A lot of times people have that for their jewelry making as well. I'll put like a dab of super glue on that knot to just like really fuse it together. And then I'll slide one of my beads over it. So I'll hide it, so here's my knot, you guys. I'll slide it under one of my larger beads and trim it. And so that way with the super glue and hidden under one of my beads, you can't see it at all. So you guys see that?
Yeah.
So super cute, kind of big for a bracelet, but you get the idea of how easy it is to do and the kind of gifts you could make. And you could even like sell these if you're a jewelry artist, just one of a kind pieces. Your Etsy shop, where I know farmers markets and booths are starting to open back up. So yeah, just a lot of fun.
Great,
Any more
Jessie.
questions?
I don't think so. We just had some great suggestions toward the end. Catherine said, add a little drop of E6000. Somebody says if you wrap an extra bottom bead in a loop of the string before you start, it will stop the rest of the beads, and then just pull the string when you're done, ready to tie it.
Great idea.
Wendy said Michael sells something called Bead Buddy, which is great for clamping the end of your string or wire. So I didn't know that, but that's a great thing to know.
You guys, we learn so much from these classes. We get so inspired today, you guys. That's why we always encourage you to hashtag Plaid Crafts, because we get so many ideas from you guys. I had no idea about Bead Buddy, so I'm definitely gonna go get that.
Yeah. Yep. And people just saying how much blah, blah, blah. I can't speak today. People just saying how much they enjoyed the class.
Awesome.
So. Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much. We have so much fun teaching in the Michael's Community Classroom with all of you. We just have a blast getting to chat with you and getting to talk to you and learn from you and inspire you. So make sure, like I keep saying, if you decide to make any of these projects, hashtag Plaid Crafts and hashtag Michael's Community Classrooms and make it with Michael's. So we can see everything you're making and Michael's can see what you're making. I believe this is our last Mod Podge class for Mod Podge month, because next week is already June. So we're so excited. We've got all kinds of new content we can't wait to show you guys. Don't forget, if you're interested in painting, if you're interested in learning more about painting, we do a paint night for Michael's every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's always a blast. We always have tons of people on that class. So make sure to check that out if you're interested, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.